Have you ever noticed that the results of virtually all health studies that we receive favors whites over blacks? Some things are so obviously ridiculous that it's only by not critically thinking nor applying common sense that it cannot be seen. For when critically thinking and applying common sense, it then becomes clear just how cartoonishly unrealistic this scenario actually is, to constantly have study results so one-sidedly favoring whites over blacks. It's actually fraudulent propaganda that are deliberately designed to subliminally embed the message that the bodies of whites are inherently superior to the bodies of blacks. It's called subliminal programming. Subliminal programming is when a hidden message has been embedded within the propaganda that we're repeatedly receiving. A hidden message that is designed to bypass the conscious mind and then to become embedded within our subconscious mind. When black people constantly receive those study results, we're constantly favoring whites over black, the myth of white racial superiority is being subliminally embedded into our collective minds without us even realizing it. The white society has never earned the blind trust of black people, nor have they ever earned the credibility to exclusively control what black people believes about ourselves. They've been telling lies about us for over 500 years. It's the way they are, it's the way they've always been, and it's the only way they know how to be. They've merely brainwashed many of us to forget who they are and or to believe that they have changed. They have in fact not. Because Caucasians controls all of the information that are constantly fed into our society, they feed us lies that constantly exalts themselves and falsely marginalizes us. It's a social engineering tactic that creates and sustains false assumptions within a society that aids the white society in maintaining its social dominance over its black population. To truly liberate ourselves, we must elevate our thinking above a biblical fairy tale and a silly slave syndrome myth. Attempting to liberate ourselves based upon those works of fiction are equivalent to trying to liberate ourselves based upon a comic book. To our own detriment, the black ignorant are stubbornly ignorant of their own ignorance. True black liberation begins with learning of the many true hidden social sciences that white oppressive forces currently secretly deploys to facilitate their ongoing long-term oppression of us. We must then develop our own counter strategies that are necessary to overcome them. A social science fact is that all societies function based upon the narratives that are repetitively fed into the society. To keep the white society functioning in ways that aids in maintaining its white social dominance over its black population, the narratives repetitively fed into our society are literally falsely scripted to propagate the myth that whites are inherently superior to blacks. It's a racist perception management system. Perception management is a propaganda technique that involves altering the public perceptions of reality to suit the objective of the ruling class. It's an essential part of modern information warfare. Perception management systems are very effective for controlling people and in order to steer a society towards an implied objective. Because people function based upon their perception rather than what's actually true. Therefore, all that's required to control the people is to control their perceptions. Those study results that so unrealistically favors whites over blacks also embeds the myth of white racial superiority over blacks into the collective minds of the masses itself, the entire population. Embedding this perception within the collective minds of the masses directly aids in maintaining white social dominance over black people. This perception creates societal norms that influence hiring, firing, promotion practices in ways that maintains white social dominance over blacks. An example of this is seen in when hiring managers pass over associated names associated with black people when reviewing resumes. You know, if you don't understand the system of white supremacy, then everything they do will only confuse you. Neely Fuller Jr. said that. Don't be fooled. If the oppressors were truly superior, they wouldn't have to tell so many lies to convey it. Nor would they have to work so hard behind the scenes to handicap those whom they claim are inferior. The hidden truth of the matter is that most facts not only refute the myth of white racial superiority, most indicate the exact opposite. However, those study results are being deliberately kept from the public. They're being suppressed in order to maintain the perception that whites are inherently superior to blacks. However, once you start researching facts for yourself, rather than allowing the white society to blindly tell you what to believe, you'll then realize that the myth of white racial superiority over blacks only prevail when white people are controlling the narratives. Outside of white control, the myth of white racial superiority totally disappears. In fact, we most often see the exact opposite. Case, point, and proof. When they started integrating sports by allowing black athletes to join white teams, those white team owners that initially refused to integrate found it impossible to remain competitive against those teams that had integrated. White integrated teams with only 1 to 3 black players were dominating those teams that refused to integrate. This forced those white team owners that originally refused to integrate to do so. Now critically think and ponder upon the fact for a moment that those all-white teams were not able to compete against integrated teams with only 1 to 3 players. Only 1 to 3 players on their rosters. This fact totally refutes the study results that constantly subliminally conveys the lies that the bodies of whites are inherently superior to blacks. Totally. Moreover, black athletes most often outperform and dominate white athletes in sporting arenas around the world. To combat this reality, white propagandists constantly spreads false study results favoring whites over blacks. There's more. Do you know that African babies advance earlier and faster than European babies? In the developmental psychology of the black child, Dr. Amos Wilson analyzed studies conducted by white social scientists that reveal significant difference in how quickly black babies developed and compared to Caucasian babies. The study found that at only 9 hours old, African babies were able to prevent their head from falling backwards. It took a European baby roughly 6 weeks to accomplish the same task. By the time a black baby was 11 months old, they were able to climb steps alone, while white babies typically took about 15 months to accomplish the same task. 4 recent studies funded by the National Institute of Mental Health on psychiatry studies reported that whites have the highest rate of lifetime mental disorders. A Cornell University-led study published in the journal Nature also found that blacks are genetically stronger and had the greatest amount of genetic diversity. White people are far more prone to various genetic defects, malfunctions, and disorders. Did you know that the real reason why Africans were used as slaves in America rather than the Native Americans that were already in America is because Africans have the strongest immune systems? The slaves needed for the white invaders needed stronger immune systems to survive the many diseases carried by the Europeans. Europeans brought large numbers of diseases to America that caused the death of millions of Native Americans. Nearly all of the European diseases were communicable by air and touch, thus making it easy for the disease to spread rapidly. This made it very easy for the Native Americans to become infected by those diseases. Millions of Native Americans died due to diseases carried by the Europeans. Speaking of diseases, did you know that the sexual transmitted diseases of syphilis and gonorrhea originated in Europe? During ancient times, whenever a European country was affected by these diseases, they would blame the neighboring country for the disease. So the inhabitants of Italy and Germany and the United Kingdom named syphilis and gonorrhea the French diseases. The French named it the Neapolitan diseases. The Russians assigned it to the Polish. The Polish called it the German diseases. The Danish called it the Portuguese diseases, etc., etc. But what is known to be a fact are that the diseases originated in Europe. This fact has been conveniently left out of the history books. Had these diseases originated in Africa, they would have been heavily propagated throughout the West, and everyone would know the stories. But because it's from whites, they hide it. Because Caucasians control all information, they routinely conceal all unflattering facts about themselves to create and sustain the illusion of their racial superiority. There's more. Most people are unaware of the fact that when the early African Homo sapiens traveled into Europe, that they encountered thousands of pinkish white-skinned Neanderthals already living in Europe. Neanderthals that had been living in Europe for over 80,000 years, according to the experts. Although Caucasian shares more physical characteristics with those Neanderthals of ancient Europe than they prevalently do would be melanated Africans, they totally separate themselves from those Neanderthals of ancient Europe and have instead claimed themselves as being African Homo sapiens that turned white due to migrating to the colder climates of Europe, an alleged form of cold weather albinism. However, it's been scientifically proven that Caucasians are not African albinos. The term albinism is reserved to describe a syndrome resulting from a drastic change in genes that disables the production of melanin. Albinism is caused by a mutation in different genes that abrogates or drastically decreases melanin production. And in some cases, no melanin is produced at all. People with albinism have translucent skin and vision defects, more seriously in people with OCA1 mutation than people with OCA2 mutation. The mutation can occur in any ethnic group on any continent. The premise that Caucasian skin color is caused by albinism has been scientifically proven as an absolute lie. The Caucasians also claim themselves as being the highest evolved Homo sapiens, while labeling Africans as being the lowest evolved. They repeatedly convey this premise through their Darwin evolutionary chart, which they always place white skin onto the highest evolved level of the chart, and they places the darkest skin on the lowest evolved level of the chart, subliminally conveying white superiority, black inferiority. However, that myth has also been scientifically proven to be a lie. All facts are, again, exact opposite. Studies on genetic finds that Africans are the only true Homo sapiens and that Caucasians are in fact Neanderthals. According to two recent studies published in the journal Nature that looked at the DNA fossil hidden in the modern human genome, Africans are the only pure homogeneous species, and the Darwin evolutionary chart does not apply to we Africans. Unlike Caucasians that evolved from lower primates, Africans have always been Homo sapiens. Neanderthals are totally separate species. The implication of these findings are enormous. This means that Caucasians are literally Neanderthals masquerading themselves as being African Homo sapiens. These studies also reveal that people of European descent today retain Neanderthal DNA that affects their hair, their skin, their fertility, their another possible characteristic, and their predisposition to certain diseases. The scientific term for Caucasian is not actually Homo sapien. It is actually Homo sapiens sapiens. This subspecies primates is said to have distinguished themselves over 80,000 years based upon archaeologists' research and findings. The true reason why white people perform laboratory experiments on inbred lab rats is because those rats have been inbred to imitate the genetics of Caucasians, their subspecies makeup. If they want to know how something will impact the true Homo sapiens, we Africans, they will then use the normal non-inbred colored rat. We Africans have been scientifically proven as being the true Homo sapiens, and we are not on the Caucasian Darwin evolutionary chart. We're totally separate species. And the name Homo sapien means wise humans. Homo is the Latin word for human or man, and sapien derived from the word Latin, which means wise or astute. The name the wise human is appropriate because we Africans introduced science, writing, math, and philosophy to the world. Africans invented the wheel, the paper, the calendar, the concept of 24 hours in a day. Africans are the first to build in stone and the first to smelt metal. The world's oldest university, libraries, manuscript, encyclopedia, human prosthetic, and medical tools, medical journals, and the oldest, longest standing kingdom are all located in Africa. It was Africans that civilized Europe long before they invaded Africa. Africans introduced shaving, the use of toothpaste, perfume, fragrance, deodorants, and even introduced the daily bath to Europeans. Because of the white society's perception management system that now keeps everything negative about black people, many may now present me the question that if we were that great, then how come we're not great now? Don't let them fool you. Because our enemies writes our narratives and controls our media images, they negligently distort them in order to condition us to perceive ourselves through a fraudulent, inferior identity that aids them in maintaining their social dominance over us. However, we're still a great people, quiet as is being kept, in spite of cultural traumas wrought by the injustice of white racism and slavery. Most inventions that have revolutionized the world were either invented by black people or were directly inspired by black people. Welcome to the real world. Without black people, there would exist no internet. We'd have no cell phones. We wouldn't have cameras and microphones on our cell phones. We wouldn't have the accurate weather forecasting system. We wouldn't have the cataract laser removal scope. There would be no emails, no GPS, no hearing aids, no touch-tone phones, no caller ID, no home surveillance security systems, no motorized vehicles, no steam engines, no traffic lights, no working light bulbs, no elevators, therefore no skyscrapers. There'd be no air conditioning. There would be no modern color PC. There'd be no 3D movies. We wouldn't have central heating, refrigerators. We wouldn't have helicopters, washing machines, lawnmowers, dryers, refrigerated trucks. There'd be no blood banks. There'd be no fiber optics. There'd be no nanotechnology, no female sanitary pads. There'd be no bathroom tissue holders, no pencil sharpeners, etc., etc. The world would be much lesser without we Africans. Africans have, in fact, enriched nearly every aspect of the lives of every person on this planet through our many inventions, and these are facts. Through the white society's monopoly over the information and media images that are fed into the society, they've manipulated millions to believe that most inventions that have revolutionized the world came from Caucasians, and that black people are the leeches of society that haven't invented much throughout history. Maintaining this system aid them maintain their social dominance, but that's a distorted perception of reality. Is created and sustained for maintaining white social dominance over black people. You have to learn social science if you're going to wake up, to liberate yourself. Until we break the monopoly the white oppressors have over our minds, Liberation is not only impossible, it is in fact unthinkable. Neely Fuller Jr. also said that. Now let's return to the term Homo sapiens and the Homo sapiens sapiens. The Caucasians gave themselves the scientific term of Homo sapiens sapiens, which sounds close enough to Homo sapiens, because doing so allows them to confuse the masses, to pass themselves off as being descendants of we Africans. They're not. They are a totally separate species. We are of man and they are of mankind. Now, this might be of a disappointment to those of you that favors the premise that all life originated out of Africa and spread around the world. They're playing semantics on you. Homo sapiens came out of Africa, and they all claim to be Homo sapiens, but that's not the case. The story of Caucasians being albinos has totally fallen apart. The story of Caucasians being humans has totally fallen apart. And there are many reputable scientists who have written extensively on the subject that Caucasians are not African Homo sapiens, but their work is being suppressed by the white establishment who wants to maintain the illusion that they've created. One such author and researcher is Dr. Robert Sevier, a Caucasian anthropologist and author who wrote the book called Species with Amnesia, Our Forgotten History. He writes that Caucasians evolved a total separate species from the African Homo sapien. He further explained that if we are of one family, why then does the Rh negative African mother carrying an Rh positive Caucasian child tries to reject her offspring? He says humanity isn't one race, but it's a hybrid of species. Now, what Dr. Sevier is referring is a medical fact that most people aren't aware of. When the Rh positive Caucasian male impregnates a Rh negative African woman, her body produces anti-Rh gluten that automatically produces in the bloodstream that tries to abort the baby. And automatically tries to abort the baby that's in her body. Now, scientists says that had it not been for this biological response within the African woman, that there would have been a greater number of mixed babies born during slavery. That biological response kept that number down to what it was. Now, here are the details of this procedure. Whenever a black woman becomes impregnated by a white man, her doctor has to give her a ROGAM injection, RHOGAM injection, ROGAM injection to prevent her body from trying to naturally abort the baby. If her doctor fails to do this, it's medical practice. When a woman receives a ROGAM, it protects her immune system from exposure to the current baby's Rh positive blood. If she does not receive this injection, her body may often develop the antibodies and attempt to attack the baby's blood type, subsequently ending the pregnancy, which will cause what's called HDN, which can cause serious illness, brain damage, or even death to the fetus. Now, this isn't common knowledge, but it's the absolute truth. It's why black expecting mothers are always asked, what is the race of the father? This biological response within the African woman is the reason why mulattoes during slavery wasn't significantly greater than it actually was. The pregnant woman typically receives her ROGAM twice during their pregnancy, once at approximately 28 weeks and once within 72 hours of delivery. If in fact the newborn baby isn't Rh positive, this is because the Rh is actually the rhesus monkey factor. One of the biggest kept secret in the white world is the fact that the blood group exclusively with Europeans is what they call the Rh monkey factor. Isn't it funny they call us monkey, but yet they're the ones. Rh stands for rhesus monkey. The Rh factor is a condition that's within the European blood that the African blood tries to reject. Now, according to white geneticists and biochemists, the agglutinating antibody was found to be a hybrid structure, which supposedly classifies as a rhesus monkeys as being a mixed monkey, a mixed breed, a mix of different types of species. 90% of Caucasians carries that rhesus monkeys factor. Also, 0.5% of Caucasians were born with a vestigial tail. The little tiny tail you see, that's higher than any other racial group. Scientists have also found that the pineal gland within Caucasians are over 80% calcified. According to many scientists, the pineal gland, located in the center of the brain, is important not only because it produces melanin, but also because the pineal gland produces the human traits characteristic with behaviors associated with possessing a soul. This includes sympathy, compassion, empathy, and remorse. It is therefore regarded as being the principal seat of the soul. This literally means that the pineal gland that produces the behavior of sympathy, compassion, and the human traits characteristic with having a soul only functions at a 20% capacity within Caucasians. This scientific finding correlates with the collective barbaric and immoral behavior demonstrated by Caucasians throughout history. While labeling all other races as being savages, the Caucasians have in fact been the most brutally savage throughout history. It's the reality that we're forbidden through censorship and sanctions from ever speaking of. However, when observing the scientific finding that 80% of where the soul lies within Caucasians is calcified, and then reviewing the Caucasians' horrific history, their horrific behaviors throughout history, it's logical to ask the legitimate question is, do they actually have souls? And are they merely just impersonating the behaviors of empathy and sympathy? In the book, The Iceman Inheritance, an author Michael J. Bradley, who himself is Caucasian, writes that the evil proclivities that exist amongst Caucasians within their inherent psyche is directly connected to the ancient prehistoric beginnings. The more we study, to find knowledge, don't limit to reading what the white man wants you to read. You have to research the stuff he don't want you to find. That's how you find your liberating information. Read what he don't want you to know. And once you find that truth, you share it unrelentingly. Share it unrelentingly. The white society sits upon a throne of lies. Lies they've got us believing. We have to understand the science, the social science of how to maintain their dominance. This is the science of perception management. This is the science of social engineering. The science of hacking the group mind, the herd mind. We have to learn these tactics. These are the tactics they're using to facilitate the ongoing long-term oppression of us. We have to learn what information warfare means, psychological warfare. Put down your Bibles, put down Willie Lynch, and learn psychological warfare, social engineering. Learn the social sciences that are being used to maintaining white social dominance, the constant manipulation of what they're doing to us. One love and peace.